making fun of women's looks, talking down to a top Latino journalist, saying thousands of Muslims in New Jersey had cheered 9/11. And each time the knockout verdict came loud and certain. That's it. This guy's finished. And each time the national public opinion polls said differently. Well, then in the wake of the San Bernardino shootings, Trump called for a ban on all Muslims entering the country. And while most people rejected the idea as un-American, Trump fans held firm. They liked what he said. But what about the man himself? Who is this guy so many people have told pollsters they want as our next president? What's he done to get where he is? What allows him to say things that would kill anyone else in public life? What's he got hold of? Well, over the next hour, we're going to look at the Donald Trump story as a whole. You'll see him as a young man, as a budding business tycoon, and as an entertainer. You'll see that the experts have been counting him out for decades. It's for months in a roiling campaign. But in December, many believed he went too far.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
It played well with some of his supporters.
Okay, we are civilized people. These people, with their beliefs, are not civilized. And that we can't change them. They're not willing to change.
But many in his own party criticized him. The White House spokesman said it disqualified him from the presidency. And experts questioned its feasibility and whether it's the right way to fight terrorism.
He's hurting the best tool that law enforcement and people in both parties believe we have to fight terrorism, which is the help of the Muslim American community. And this hurts us abroad, too.
As he had with his campaign kickoff, it once again displayed Trump's readiness to conquer by dividing.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
No one was really focusing on immigration policy. And then suddenly, it is the issue that America is obsessed with.
Trump is acting in a very old and shameful American tradition. It goes back to the 1850s when there was a party that had the name Know Nothing, and it was an anti-Catholic, anti-immigrant political party. It didn't last that long, but then every so often, like a fever, anti-immigrant feeling arises.
He has tapped into a part of the electorate that is, I think, deeply angry about the state of the economy. It's a group of people who are still suffering from the downturn in 2007 and 2008.
As Trump's numbers rose in a crowded field, the Hispanic population reacted with anger.
Right here and still talking.
On June 26, 2015, Univision canceled its broadcast of Trump's Miss Universe pageant. NBC then announced it would not air the Miss Universe or the Miss USA pageants, and Macy's removed Trump merchandise from its stores. But Trump stayed resolute in his message.
We are taking Mexico's problems. Mexico is beating us on trade, and they're beating us at the border. But Mexico doesn't want to take these people.
Controversy didn't seem to hurt him. By mid-July, he passed the great establishment hope, Jeb Bush, in the polls. He was finding his audience.
Hey, I like this guy. He's saying what we're saying in the pool hall, or he's saying what we're saying around the coffee table in the morning.
Come on, get in here.
So he's tapped into something.
I think it's both a bit of populism, a bit of racism. It is also real.
On July 11, 5,000 people showed up for a Trump rally in Arizona, a state at the epicenter of the nation's battle over immigration reform.
These are people that shouldn't have been in this country. They flow in like water.
He's playing on our aspirations to be rich, which most Americans have, and he's playing on our disgust with politics as usual, and that's a pretty potent combination for him in certain parts of the Republican Party.
Trump led in the polls by a wide margin heading into the first Republican debate hosted by Fox News on August 6th.
You've called your Twitter account?
Only Rosie O'Donnell.
About Rosie O'Donnell. And Megyn, I think, was very surprised that the audience didn't boo, but instead they cheered, they laughed, they rallied, they were supportive. That changed everything.
You once told a contestant on Celebrity Apprentice it would be a pretty picture to see her on her knees. Does that sound to you like the temperament of a man we should elect as president?
I think the big problem this country has is being politically correct. And honestly, Megyn, if you don't like it, I'm sorry. I've been very nice to you, although I could probably maybe not be based on the way you have treated me, but I wouldn't do that.
She wanted to talk about, whether he was sexist. He flipped this into a discussion of whether he's politically correct. And what did he say? You know what? I'm not politically correct. If you don't like it, that's too bad.
You could see there was blood coming out of her eyes, blood coming out of her wherever.
Comments during a phone interview with CNN's Don Lemon got Trump uninvited from a Republican red state event. Critics roared, but his poll numbers held strong. Later in August, Trump held a campaign rally in Alabama. 30,000 people showed up.
We're going to build a wall.
And at a press conference in Dubuque, Iowa, Univision anchor Jorge Ramos stood up to ask a question without being called upon.
Trump has a question about immigration. Your immigration plan.
Okay, who's next? Yeah, please. Excuse me, sit down. You weren't called. Sit down.
Again, exactly what we've been waiting for. People did not fly all the way to Dubuque to listen to you read from your little speech. And that's exactly what Jorge Ramos was doing. He was reading from a speech. Trump had him thrown out. It was great.
Okay.
And then Trump invited him back in and took his question.
Yes. Good. Absolutely. Good. Absolutely. Good to have you back.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
There's an illusion within the American press that the people cherish what we do. I got news for you. If they find somebody who's going to give us a punch in the nose or a black eye, they're cheering them on. And that's what happened. Trump knew what he was doing.
So the Jorge Ramos confrontation, worked well with his base. That represented why it is very possible for Trump to win the nomination, but impossible for him to win the election. Any Republican candidate needs to get at least 40% of the Latino vote to have a chance electorally.
The more controversy, the higher his numbers went. The more people criticized him, the higher the numbers went. The more provocative he was, the higher his numbers went. Donald Trump knew exactly what he was doing. He was strategic, he was brilliant, and it was the summer of Trump.
I would vote for Donald Trump if I was female on ballot. Definitely. This is very new. This is the equivalent to Obama new. You know what I mean? First black president, first interesting president.
Now suddenly, the summer of Trump is becoming the autumn of Trump. Trump's not going down, he's going up.
When Citizen Trump continues.
I joke and I say there's only one rogue in every family, and Donald's a rogue to heaven. He's a pretty good rogue.
He loved it. That was his hobby. He was a taskmaster. He was, strong.
On the rounds, he'd go around to construction sites. Every penny counted, every penny in construction and every penny in rent.
That was how they bonded as father and son. Donald learned the business by following and shadowing his father from a very, very young age.
During the 1940s and 50s, Fred Trump built housing in Queens and Brooklyn for returning veterans. And soon he owned 39 apartment complexes throughout the city and was a multimillionaire.
I think the important thing about Fred Trump is he gives the lie to the idea that Donald Trump is somehow some kind of self-made man.
Friends and family say that Trump was a tough-to-handle teenager.
I met Donald when he was very young. He was wild. He was incorrigible. He was difficult. Highly spirited.
I joke and I say there's only one rogue in every family, and Donald's a rogue to heaven. He's a pretty good rogue.
He was a brat.
After enough of this kind of misbehaving and not following the rules, his dad packed him up and sent him away to military school. And he actually says it's the best thing that happened to him. He really did need the discipline.
I loved it. It was terrific training. It was tough, but it was good.
So he was tough to handle, had to be sent to the New York Military Academy. Excellent. He's an alpha male.
He's given a uniform and a belt with brass buckles that he's told to keep shiny and subjected to very intense discipline.
Those were days where it wasn't like today. I mean, they hit and they did whatever the hell they had to do. They were a tough lot.
Trump thrived at New York Military Academy. He was a star on the baseball team, was elected captain, and led the honor guard at New York City's Columbus Day Parade. And during the summer, Trump began working for his father.
We used to have contests, and he used to always respect the fact that I always had the record. I was able to have painted with 2 painters 6 hallways in one day. We used spray. That's the all-time Trump Organization record. So it was great. At the time, that was like the greatest achievement of my life.
Trump graduated in 1964 and went to Fordham University for 2 years before transferring to the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. He graduated in 1968, and after all his military training, a medical deferment makes him ineligible for the Vietnam-era draft. Trump went to work for his successful father, Fred, but the boroughs of Brooklyn and Queens were not enough for him. He'll take Manhattan.
From the time I was very young, I've been fascinated with the New York skyline.
Coming up, Trump moves across the river to Manhattan, and the New York real estate business will never be the same.
Worked with my father, and he built housing in Brooklyn and Queens. And it was dangerous stuff. I mean, you'd knock on a door and there'd be bullet holes through the door. I'd say to the people, what are those holes? And they'd say, those are bullet holes from knocking on the door and collecting rent. And I said, you know, I think I'd rather sell apartments to Johnny Carson and Steven Spielberg. It's much easier.
As a kid from Queens, Manhattan was always the Emerald City in the distance, a real beacon that drew him.
In 1971, Trump moved to his first apartment in Manhattan, a studio on the Upper East Side. He was 24 years old, and family and friends say he was enjoying himself.
He always went to what he called the swingle bars. Yeah, he checked out the women.
Donald was a high flyer when it comes to that.
He joined some private clubs, and that's where he rubbed shoulders with George Steinbrenner and Roy Cohn, the infamous lawyer and former McCarthy aide.
Whenever I hear that people have been failing to act on FBI information about communists.
He said, listen, I followed your career, and you seem you're a little bit crazy like I am, and you stand up to the establishment. Can I come see you? And I said, sure.
Cohn was one of Trump's first really influential connections.
He had no scruples whatsoever, none. Just get the deal done and whatever it takes to get the deal done. So Trump used him as this killer lawyer, you know, to go in and cut deals.
I think Donald likes associating himself with people who are brass knuckle, tough characters, uncompromising characters.
Young Trump's ambition was reflected in his early business ventures.
Well, my first big deal in Manhattan was probably the Convention Center.
In 1973, Trump saw in the newspaper that the Penn Central rail yards were filing for bankruptcy.
I got an option to the Penn Central land and was able to convince then Governor Kerry that this is the place to build the Convention Center.
Trump did not build what becomes the Jacob Javits Convention Center, but he did make more than $1 million brokering part of the deal. In April of 1977, Trump closed a more personal deal. He married Czech model Ivana Zelenček. Roy Cohn drew up the prenup.
The thing that first attracted me was her beauty. She was very beautiful, and I liked her because she was also very solid. You know, everything boom, 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 very orderly.
On New Year's Eve, 1977, the couple had the first of their 3 children, Donald Jr. Trump set his sights on another troubled Penn Central property, the Commodore Hotel next to Grand Central Station. He had to convince the bankruptcy overseers that he could make a deal with banks reluctant to invest in New York City real estate.
Donald told the Penn Central folks that they should meet him at City Hall, and he would introduce them to Mayor Abe Beame.
In New York, real estate is about tax abatements. It's about making deals with political people. It's about zoning, and it's about getting the public, and especially the public officials, on your side.
The Penn Central executives arrived at City Hall. Mayor Beam invited them in. There was Donald, and the mayor said, what the Trumps want, the Trumps get in this town.
They really didn't know what the future of New York City was. And that was both good and bad. It was good in that I was able to get tremendous tax advantages and tax abatements. It was bad in that it wasn't easy to get financing.
After attaining multi-million-dollar tax abatements, Trump received the necessary financing to develop what would become the Grand Hyatt Hotel.
People ask me, how is it that you got 40 years of tax abatement? And I'd always say, because I didn't ask for 50.
I interviewed him when he was an unknown on the Today Show many years ago.
You bought some prized properties at the bottom of the New York market in the 1970s.
I had a great faith in New York. Primarily, our purchases have been in New York. And about 5 years ago, New York was not considered very hot, and cities in general weren't considered too hot. I see the inner cities as being sort of a wave of the future now. I know
Trump was on the Today Show to talk about his next big project, Trump Tower.
Or the Trump Tower now was bought with Taylor, and they had beautiful bas-relief kind of carvings there. He just wrecked him. And I said, how could you have done that?
Couldn't you have saved just those sculptures that you had?
Well, it would have been very, very dangerous to have saved them. They weighed 2 tons. They were 15 feet high. They were about 2.5 feet thick. And if they would have fallen, people could have been very badly hurt and killed. And to me, it was not worth it. We just ripped those out without any consideration for their historic value. And the people he had doing the demolition were illegal immigrants.
In an interview with the New York Times, Trump said he did not know there were undocumented workers on the site.
Mr. Trump, what's left in your life? You're 33 years old. You're worth all this money. You say you didn't say that you want to be worth $1 billion.
No, I really don't. I really am not looking to make tremendous amounts of money. I'm looking to enjoy my life. And if that happens to go with it, that's fabulous.
In 1981, there was heartbreak. His older brother, Fred, an alcoholic, died.
His brother was so young when he died, 42 years old, and his brother told him, Donald, don't ever drink, don't ever get involved with alcohol. And that's why Donald, to this day, has never had alcohol, never smoked, doesn't touch the stuff.
A few weeks after the loss of his brother, a happy moment for the family, Donald and Ivana welcomed daughter Ivanka. Trump rode high in the 1980s, bought a yacht, an airline, a professional football team, and Palm Beach Palace, Mar-a-Lago. With 118 rooms, it is one of the largest homes in the nation.
People of modest means look at that and they say, wow, if I were rich, that's how I'd want to live. People love the way he lives because he symbolizes the American success story. He symbolizes the way you'd live, the bling.
Coming up, winning and losing with Donald. In 1982, he bought a prized piece of real estate along the Atlantic City boardwalk. To get Holiday Inn to make a deal with him, he invited their executives to the site and made it look like construction was well underway.
I had every truck available in the area moving on that site. We had trucks going back and forth and working all over the place. They saw that action. They were immediately impressed, and we made a deal like right then on the spot.
In 1984, the same year Harrah's at Trump Plaza opened, Donald and Ivana welcomed their third child, Eric. A year later, Trump Castle opened.
They were cash cows. Particularly Trump Plaza. It was the first casino that anybody driving into Atlantic City hit when they arrived there. It was essentially a license to print money.
Closer to home, actually across the street from his home, the Woolman skating rink in Central Park had been closed for years. It's 1986.
They had spent over $20 million over a 7-year period. And then finally, I said, this is ridiculous. This thing shouldn't take years to build. And I was able to convince everybody to let me build it.
Donald, as the gifted self-promoter, went out there and pitched this as I got the project done that the New York City government couldn't get done.
I think you see the same instinct coming out now that you did with the Woolman Rink, with Trump being frustrated at how inept and useless government is and jumping in and saying, I'm going to fix this.
Across the street from the Woolman Rink, Trump bought a crown jewel of New York in 1988, the Plaza Hotel, for $400 million. Ivana was put in charge and spent millions more to renovate.
Is there anything you wouldn't support your man in?
Oh, sure.
Oh, sure.
I wouldn't support if Donald would be running around and fooling around, you know, and that I couldn't live with.
In 1990, the tabloids were reporting that Trump was doing just that with a young actress named Marla Maples.
One headline I think everybody remembers was Marla Maples, best sex I ever had.
Marla denies ever saying that, but it's telling that the tabloids in New York would be so accustomed to Trump craziness that they'd run with it.
Divorce is a challenging and terrible thing for anyone. We'd see our parents on the cover of the Post every morning walking to school. And they really, I mean, I have to give them both credit. They did everything in their power to, you know, help us through it.
While the divorce proceedings played out in the tabloids, at the office it was business as usual. Michael Jackson performed at the star-studded opening of Atlantic City's Trump Taj Mahal in 1990.
There's never been anything like this built in this country. And I think that's why you see the huge crowds today, and that's why you're going to see the huge crowds for many years to come.
It was the most expensive casino ever built, costing more than $1 billion, most of it borrowed money.
This was a time when borrowing money was easy. Junk bonds were created and refined during the 1980s.
Every marquee purchase, from the Plaza Hotel to the Trump Shuttle and later to the Trump Taj Mahal, the construction of that and the purchase of that, was all built on debt.
I was taking things a little bit too for granted. A major business magazine came out with a story, "Everything he touches turns to gold." And I started to believe that myself.
If you owe the bank a little, it owns you. If you own the bank a lot, you own the bank. And that's essentially what happens.
I never worked so hard. Convincing those banks to give me more money so I could keep going and ultimately get them paid back was one of the best deals I ever made.
Coming up, new opportunities and a new audience. The roaring 80s were fading into memory. It was 1990, and with the national real estate market in decline, Trump's empire was on the brink of collapse.
Well, this week, the bankers took over Donald Trump's life. I mean, did they take over? From now on, almost everything he does and every penny he spends, it needs their approval.
As real estate nationally and even globally goes down, Trump goes down with it, and he loses the Plaza Hotel. But he also wound up being $900 million in hock to the banks.
What that allowed him to do was cut a deal where they could pay the fees he needed to pay as part of his divorce settlement, the money he needed to retain Trump, his condo in Trump Tower, which was really an enormously symbolic security blanket. So he escaped personal bankruptcy, but he essentially became a shadow of the guy he was in the 1980s.
Trump's downturn extended to his personal life. In December, his long-expected divorce from Ivana became official. He was single again.
Just this past weekend, you had a big party in Palm Beach. You invited just a few of your close friends, like the Miami Dolphin and the Buffalo Bill cheerleaders.
Donald Trump is the Hugh Hefner of the 90s.
For an older person, he's very attractive.
He was seen in public with Marla Maples, but he was not ready to tie the knot.
So, when is the big day?
It's truthfully one of those.
In October of 1993, they had a baby girl, Tiffany Trump, and 2 months later, Marla Maples became Mrs. Donald Trump. Over the next few years, the real estate market rebounded, and Donald Trump was back on top, valued at $450 million on the Forbes Wealthiest Americans list. What Trump said was more like $2 billion.
Donald is one of the few people, and I think the researchers at Forbes have always said this, who personally lobbies them to not only be included on the list, but to constantly push himself upward in the ranks.
What people think of Donald Trump is important to him. He may or may not admit it, but it's important to him. All of this, poll numbers, Forbes list, you name it, his position matters to him.
In 1997, he filed for divorce from Marla Maples, and less than a year later, Trump fell in love, this time with 28-year-old Slovenian supermodel Melania Naus.
I met her at a party, and as soon as I saw her, I said, you know, that's a very special person. I knew what I wanted as soon as I saw her.
He was very charming, and it was really the energy between us when we started to talk. And that's important, that we both felt the same way.
1999 was a presidential campaign year, and Trump discussed running.
Give me a scenario, as we say in the movies, of a perfect Donald Trump run for
Perfect run would be I do no campaigning. I run only on election day. I get at least 51% in a three-way race.
Trump ultimately decided not to run, but that did not mean he faded from view.
He essentially became somebody who licensed his name ultimately on an array of products that included vodka, underwear, mattresses, clothing, an online university, and basically anything, anywhere that you could glue his name on. He did, and he took the fee.
In 2004, Trump got the brass ring of publicity, a network primetime television show about what else? Donald Trump. The Apprentice premiered on NBC.
You're fired.
The Apprentice is Donald Trump's baby. I mean, he is heavily involved. He's actually there quite a bit. It is something that he clearly takes a lot of pride in.
The show was a hit for NBC, and things were going well at home, too. In January 2005, Donald Trump married Melania.
Did you guys sign a prenup?
Absolutely. I won't need it, but we did.
I can't believe I just asked you that.
A year later, Melania gave birth to Trump's fifth child, a son named Barron.
There's nothing more important to me than fatherhood, than family. And I have great kids. They're really hardworking.
With a hit TV show, a new family, and his name everywhere, things seem to be going well. But in this decade, there were two more bankruptcies. Trump hotels and casinos accrued an estimated $1.8 billion in debt and went bankrupt in 2004. Trump Entertainment Resorts, hit hard by the recession, went bankrupt in 2009. Tim O'Brien began writing Trump Nation in 2004 with Donald Trump's cooperation and attempted to find out what Trump's net worth really was.
When I went back and started doing the math around various statements he gave me about how much he said he was worth, the numbers weren't adding up.
The book came out in 2005, and in 2006, Trump sued O'Brien for $5 billion. He claimed he was defamed. To win, Trump had to prove O'Brien acted with malice. However, the presiding judge denied Trump's claim and ultimately dismissed the lawsuit.
We deposed Donald for 2 days, and that deposition is one of the great Rosetta Stones of understanding the real Donald Trump. Because during the course of that deposition, he really couldn't give a practical and reliable assessment about how he determines his net worth.
In 2011, Donald Trump also began throwing around the accusation that President Obama was not a U.S. citizen, that no one even knew him growing up.
By now, we've all seen the birth certificate. When everybody else had given it up, he was still hanging in there on it.
At the White House Correspondents' Dinner in 2011, President Obama struck back with humor.
No one is happier, no one is prouder to put this birth certificate matter to rest than the Donald.
And have the political staying power to endure in a crowded field of Republican candidates. So far, they are mistaken. Trump is savvy about spending almost all attention, negative or positive, to his advantage while attacking his rivals anytime they gain ground. In the middle of September, the second Republican debate aired on CNN.
They're trying to get the Republicans to mix it up. Carly, Trump says you have an ugly face. What do you think of that?
I think women all over this country heard very clearly what Mr. Trump said.
Hearing, oh, she totally won. No, she looked like a little sourpuss.
So, this is a plan that's simple.
Voters and candidates looked for a shift in focus to issues. And when September arrived, Trump announced that he had a detailed proposal for something, a tax plan.
No business of any size, from a Fortune 500 company to a mom-and-pop shop, to a freelancer living from gig to gig, will pay more than 15% of their business income in taxes.
In this tax plan, he offers something for everybody, but the most for those who have the most. If you're concerned about the national debt, it's not a plan that you would favor.
What you're saying is you make it all up with growth.
No, not all up with growth. We also start cutting because the waste in this country is
management. He's a great leader. He's going to give it to us. He doesn't have to say how. He's just going to say he will.
On October 28th, another debate, this time hosted by CNBC. The moderators were repeatedly attacked by the Republican candidates.
Jimmy, how's the economy?
Amazing, sir. In the words of our new national anthem, it's huge.
Putin has withdrawn from Ukraine. Believe me, he does not want to be called a loser again. He cried for hours.
Keep up the good work, Omarosa. You're doing fantastic.
We are going to ship 11 million people who are law-abiding, who are in this country, and
moved 1.5 million illegal immigrants out of this country. Moved them just beyond the border.
You need at least 100,000 buses to take them back to Mexico. Has he thought about that? Has he explained how that's going to happen? It is a totally impractical idea.
When Ben Carson was a threat, Trump went, well, ballistic.
How stupid are the people of Iowa? How stupid are the people of the country to believe this crap?
An unacknowledged part of the Trump mystique is that he's kind of funny. He's enjoying himself. I mean, that's a big issue. You look at all of these other mooks, and they're, you know, and they seem to be suffering. Jeb Bush, not least of all, as Donald Trump has pointed out. Trump is having fun. You know, when somebody is having fun, you start to have fun.
But not everybody was laughing as Trump impugned the patriotism of American Muslims.
I want surveillance of certain mosques, okay? I watched when the World Trade Center came tumbling down. And I watched in Jersey City, New Jersey, where thousands of people were cheering as that building was coming down.
And after CNN aired footage of a Black Lives Matter protester being beaten up by Trump supporters at a rally, Trump retweeted extreme right propaganda exaggerating racial crime statistics. Despite inaccurate and controversial claims, Trump continued to sit atop the GOP polls.
You're running for president of the United States. Your words matter. Truthfulness matters. Fact-based stuff matters.
Chuck, no? Take it easy, Chuck. Just play cool.
Are you worried that sometimes he bends the truth?
Bends the truth? You know what? He may, but he's still going to get things done.
So you don't care?
I don't care.
After a presidential address on terrorism following the San Bernardino mass shooting, Trump read his proposal to ban Muslims from entering the country.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
Reaction was swift and loud.
What was proposed yesterday is not what this party stands for, and more importantly, it's not what this country stands for.
I do believe that it disqualifies him from serving as President of the United States.
Trump's statement. He rose in the polls after this. A large part of the Republican base seemed to support the idea.
I'm supporting him, and I'm supporting what I believe he meant when he said ban Muslim immigration. You know, I don't believe he's a racist. I think he was talking about, you know, that we need to step back and re-examine the vetting process.
But many saw this as a game changer. Many thought even proposing the idea gave ISIS a propaganda victory. Maybe this time he had gone too far.
I think something changed in the media's reaction to him and the reaction of much of the American public. Remember, 2/3 of Americans don't like him. So he already has a very steep climb to actually becoming president. And I think that many of those people went from seeing this as a kind of an entertaining joke to being a dead serious political situation.
And it was topic number one when CNN aired another debate on December 15th.
Good people, right? So in his case, whatever you think of his looks, you know, he is bringing those entertainment values.
He's independently wealthy. People are fed up with the system. They're fed up with career politicians. They're all beholden to somebody. And in Trump, they see a guy who's got FU money.
You know, they say that politics is show business for ugly people, right? So in his case, whatever you think of his looks, you know, he is bringing those entertainment values directly to politics.
He will be the best president ever. We love you.
Donald Trump is a top-level New York real estate guy. You got to have big cojones to do that and promote it constantly. Reality television star. Don't have to talk about his ego. I mean, it's 6 out of every pore in his body. And he knows how to take a simple, quick message and drive it home. Can he make it last? Big question.
Poll after poll shows the heart of Donald Trump's appeal lies with the American voter who didn't go to college, who doesn't have the money, hasn't had the breaks. He is the one rallying to the billionaire from New York who rages against illegal immigration, against bad trade deals that cost us jobs, derides wars he says we shouldn't be fighting. Trump seems to be tapping into an injured sense of nationalism, especially by those most threatened. For a number of reasons, good, bad, and many would say ugly, Donald Trump has